Bitcoin's one of those things. It's complex enough that you all like no matter how long you've researched it, you always are still learning about it. But the more I learn about it, the more bullish I get. Um, and at the same time, I kind of view it as the only realistic method to change some of our monetary aspect. That we're kind of stuck in this local maximum of money, where transaction speeds are very fast, but settlement speeds of anything scarce like gold have been very slow. And so we've kind of had the century and a half of necessary abstraction, and that's easy to centralize and control and leverage. Um, and Bitcoin is the first and really only credible way to break out of that. So while I'm never 100% sure on any asset, there's all sorts of challenges and frictions that can happen. But if it's not Bitcoin, I don't really know what else it would be.
Renowned macro analyst and investment strategist Lyn Alden says she has gotten even more bullish on Bitcoin, the world's largest cryptocurrency by market cap. Alden is a prominent member of the Bitcoin community and has for the past 3 years been very bullish on Bitcoin, a crypto asset she has consistently and positively spoken about since 2020. But now Alden says she has gotten even more bullish, something one would have thought impossible for someone who has spent years researching and educating people about the many qualities of the leading cryptocurrency. The reason for Alden's renewed vigor and belief in the success and inevitability of Bitcoin is not far-fetched. She recently published her first book, Broken Money, a thought-provoking text that explores the history of money through the lens of technology. In the text, Alden essentially explores the broken state of the current fiat-based global financial system and how it is impoverishing billions of people around the world while continuously and rapidly enriching the top 1%. Alden also discusses how in the modern era, energy abundance and technological enhancements have enriched and broadly improved all aspects of our lives, with the obvious and painful exception of our outdated monetary system. According to Lyn Alden, the time has come for us to permanently change that and move from a debt-based, overly inflated, failing monetary system to one that supports scarcity and deflation, decentralization, and ease of payments and settlements via a powerful digital network. Alden recently had a discussion with Natalie Brunell on the inevitability of Bitcoin as the only suitable replacement for the current monetary system. She explains that while researching the history of money through time, from shells to gold and from papyrus bills of exchange to central banks, she again reached the conclusion that Bitcoin is the only viable answer to the world's many financial and economic challenges. Alden is also certain that it is only a matter of time before the world realizes the precariousness of our situation and everyone flocks to Bitcoin. As we bring you clips from a fascinating and enlightening conversation with one of the industry's brightest minds, please take a little time to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Also, ensure you drop your comments and observations in the comments section. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
Sure. So I view basically that, once the telegraph was invented, that allowed for rapid transmission of data. But transactions require a lot less data than settlements. So it's easy to, with more something as simple as Morse code, you can do a transaction with someone. Whereas, digital settlement or fast global settlement requires something like Bitcoin, which, if you look at what Bitcoin requires, it requires much more complex math, much more complex processors, much more complex telecommunication systems. I mean, the internet, which didn't exist back then, but then not even just the internet, you need relatively high bandwidth ways of transmitting data to have the kind of the throughput we have today with Bitcoin. And then you need certain encryption methods that, the latest encryption method that Bitcoin uses wasn't invented or released until like 2001, right? So it's kind of like Bitcoin came almost as quickly as it could have, based on the bandwidth, the processing, the encryption methods that all kind of came together. So I would argue that it's inevitable that something like the telegraph would come way before Bitcoin. And because that happens, that creates this window, which in our case was a century and a half. Maybe if there's alien races, maybe they had a shorter window, maybe they have a longer window, but that window is going to exist. And in that window, it greatly amplifies the power of those that run money, right? Because now you necessitate abstraction. If you can transfer value, if you can make transactions very quickly, but you can't settle gold very quickly, then those who are keeping the ledgers and running things are basically have a monopoly status now. And a government, has trouble enforcing rules on all of its individuals, but it can easily enforce rules on a handful of banks. Basically, it's a thousandfold less entities to go after. You can say all banks have to do this rule, And so governments were able to centralize their banking systems and basically have a monopoly. And that's how we end up in
Mhm.
this world of 160 different fiat currencies, which are all these little bubbles. And then outside of the top 10 currencies or so, currencies not really accepted anywhere else. So, for example, Thai baht, Egyptian pounds, even currencies of wealthy countries like Norway. If I go around in New Jersey trying to spend Norway physical currency, it's
Right.
actually going to be quite challenging to get that off my hands. The saleability is extremely low
Mhm.
outside of its own country and maybe a couple neighboring countries. Um, and so we've been in this environment where technology, the order that it had to happen in,
Mhm.
and for quite a while has put us in this kind of local maximum. And the invention of Bitcoin is the first credible way to end that era. We've now, after another century and a half from the telegraph, we now have digital settlement. So we have a ledger that is decentralized rather than centralized, and you can send bearer asset final settlement around. So it's not based on debt, it's not based on credit, it's not based on an IOU. It's actually just finally settled through the software
Mhm.
logic and control. And that is, it was inevitable that Bitcoin would happen. Now the question is it inevitable that Bitcoin wins, right? I can
Mhm.
picture a world where, say, the person who figured out Bitcoin was like a scammer, right? Imagine someone was as smart as Satoshi, but they gave themselves a pre-mine or something,
Right.
or spent their coins, or just had a terrible
Mhm.
personality, never disappeared, and revealed who they were. And I can imagine a world where the second currency instead kind of overtakes the first one, right? If the
Mhm.
first one was kind of launched poorly. But I think in some way, it's this is now a technology that exists. We're fortunate that Bitcoin was the first one rather than kind of a scammy one being first. That allowed the network effect to accumulate on a good system without having to be disrupted, hopefully. And so we have this. This is like the first real shot to get out of the century and a half window we've been in. And so I think it's important to keep analyzing risks, things that could prevent that. And I think it's important for people to do what they can to support that system.
Mhm.
I think it's important for companies to build on it. I think it's important for people to, um, talk about it. They can let their politicians know that they're in favor of it. There's all sorts of little things that people can do around the margins that
Mhm.
give Bitcoin the breathing room it needs to get out of its child state and into, the more large and liquid and secure it gets, the better shot it has that this is actually going to continue taking off.
During the interview, Alden explains that the technological advancements we take as basic today, like running water and refrigeration, were readily accepted by people because of the ease they bring to our daily lives. According to the renowned macro analyst, Bitcoin will soon join the rank of those technologies that have become a permanent part of our day to day lives. Alden further describes Bitcoin as the first credible way to ensure wide usability and fast settlements, something she strongly believes the whole world is going to realize before the end of the decade. But before that happens, Alden says Bitcoin investors have to support further developments and growth. She adds that for Bitcoin to succeed, it's got to be built, and that won't happen when everyone is so focused on complaining about the Fed and the system. When it grows to its full potential, Alden is convinced that Bitcoin will be as readily acceptable as running water and refrigeration.
When you see a lot of smart people into crypto, a lot of it is because they themselves can benefit from it. They're the ones that are kind of issuing tokens and then basically being able to sell them before they've actually built a product. So one of the big challenges in the crypto space is that if you look at traditional venture capital, accredited investors or founders of companies themselves are locking up their equity for many years in most cases, and their only realistic way to get out from that situation is either the company is successful enough to go public, and they can begin selling shares, or the company gets acquired by another business. So basically, a bunch of professional analysts are assessing this business and decide to acquire it and bring it in part of their business. And so the outcome of that investment is largely tied to the success of the company that they've built. Whereas in crypto, you've removed the gatekeeper, but that the incentive there is that you can sell the tokens to the public before you've actually proven the long-term viability of the project. So the founders can get rich either way, whether or not the project's successful. So there are plenty of smart people that say, well, I want to get a piece of that, right? Because
Mm.
intelligence doesn't always come with ethics, or they'll make arguments. Well, I sold something that was the market price, and I walked away rich even though I didn't build anything, right? And so I think that's the biggest risk. I think from the, say, the libertarian perspective, you can argue it's good that the gatekeepers are down, that people can. This is another type of market behavior that people can navigate. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that what we have to do as consumers is build up that experience that because those gatekeepers are down, the long tail of almost everything is going to be trash, right? And that there's way more ways for VCs and founders and just to create things to keep dumping them out there. And I
Yeah.
think there has to be a number of cycles of people learning to defend against that. So I can see why these founders are interested in it. I think, and from a consumer perspective, there's always kind of the desire to get rich. That they're going to be
Mm-hmm.
the one that gets the buys the next big thing and then gets out towards the top.
Yeah.
And obviously for every one person that does that, there are like 99 that don't do that. um, the other thing I think I'd point out is that it's been almost 15 years since Bitcoin was released, um, about 15 years since it was proposed, and the use case for things that are not money in the broad crypto space are almost nothing, right? So there's Bitcoin, there's stable coins. That's been the most effective kind of crypto technology outside of Bitcoin in terms of market cap volumes, actually solving a problem for people in the real world. It's basically another way for an Argentinian to get dollars, for example. Um, Outside of those monetary use cases, most everything else kind of comes in waves and then dies down, and then comes in another wave and dies down, and comes in another wave and dies down. And then we look at the whole space and say, what has created more value? All of that, or like one company like Kickstarter, for example, that allows kind of people to get capital and release a product and things like that, right? So I would argue that the fact that very little utility is actually emerging from the space that's not money is increasing evidence that it's not what a lot of the crypto proponents would argue that it is. I still think in general the stablecoin model of applying that to other types of assets. So if an Argentinian can own dollar, why can't they also own a share of Apple stock if they want to, right? So maybe tokenizing actually real world businesses could make sense. But again, the even if that's the case, the market cap of that idea, basically the tech rails that enable that, are limited, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
look at the total value of all stock exchanges today, for example, I mean it's worth tens and hundreds of billions of dollars, but it's not worth like $10 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
You're just the middleman. And so, tech providers or exchange providers, things like that, there might be certain markets for that type of thing to make certain types of assets more divisible or more globally accepted.
Yeah.
But I think that's just a much smaller idea than investing in a new base layer of money.
In some of her recent tweets, Alden has talked about the fourth turning, a theory propounded about the destruction of an era during which institutional life is destroyed and rebuilt in response to a perceived threat to a nation's survival. Alden explains that there is a natural entropy to existing orders where during a certain era existing institutions and systems become too outdated, unjust, and corrupted to serve their initial purposes. As a result, the populace begin to gradually reject and speak against them, just like what's currently happening in the United States, where government entities like Congress and the FDA are getting generally low approval. Alden argues that this period of intense crisis and the complete destruction and rebuilding of the global monetary system is now upon us. She also warns that there's going to be a recapitalization of the base layer of money, probably with the introduction of central bank digital currencies, and money will undergo a severe form of transformation. Though the crisis is not full-fledged yet, Alden warns that that will change any minute now and that the events of the next 5 to 10 years will be very instrumental in determining what's next for us all. However, she also stresses how important it is to avoid replacing a corrupt, centralized, and faulty system with an even more corrupt, centralized, and horrific system. What are your thoughts on Lyn Alden's interview? Don't forget to drop your comments and observations below, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos. Thanks for watching.